Mysticism is one of the oldest and deepest human experiences. It is not limited to one religion or one culture. It is the direct contact of the human soul with the ultimate reality, the divine presence, or the eternal truth. Evelyn Underhill, in this book, explains mysticism as a living path of growth. It is not a strange dream or a collection of magical practices. It is the development of spiritual consciousness that moves step by step from ordinary life to union with the divine. Mysticism has always attracted people because it speaks to the deepest hunger of the human heart. It promises a truth that is greater than intellectual arguments. It offers peace and unity beyond the noise of daily struggles. Yet, it is also a difficult journey. It requires discipline, purification, and surrender. The mystic is not simply someone who believes in God. The mystic is someone who experiences God directly. Underhill carefully shows that mysticism is not opposed to reason, psychology, or theology. Instead, it completes them by giving a higher meaning. She describes the mystic path as a universal pattern. It appears in the lives of saints, poets, philosophers, and seekers from different faiths and ages. The stages may look different in various traditions, but the essence remains the same. It is a movement from separation to union, from self to the divine. This book is divided into two main parts. The first part is called the mystic fact. Here, Underhill explains what mysticism really is. She compares it with philosophy, psychology, theology, symbolism, and even with magic. She clears the confusion and shows how mysticism is a real and vital human experience. The second part is called the mystic way. In this section, she explains the actual journey of the soul. She shows the stages of awakening, purification, illumination, dark night, and finally union. This part is practical as well as spiritual. It is like a map of the inner journey that many mystics across history have followed. The introduction prepares us to understand mysticism not as something far away, but as a real possibility for human life. It teaches us that mysticism is about growth, change, and transformation. It begins in the ordinary world, but ends in union with the eternal. Now, let us begin with Part 1, the mystic fact. This part will help us to understand the foundation of mysticism. We will start with the first chapter called The Point of Departure. Part 1. The Mystic Fact. Mysticism is not an idea or theory. It is an experience. It is the experience of direct contact with the ultimate reality, or God. It is not limited to a single religion or a single culture. Across history, in every land, men and women have felt the same deep call. They have wanted to touch the eternal, to see beyond appearances, and to live in union with the divine. Evelyn Underhill begins by showing that mysticism is a fact of human life. It is not a dream or a fantasy. It is a serious and living process. Like art or science, mysticism has its own path and its own discipline. It does not belong only to monks or saints. It is the natural flowering of the human spirit when it reaches toward its highest possibility. Mysticism can be misunderstood. Some see it as weakness or imagination. Others confuse it with magic or visions. But Underhill explains that mysticism is a way of growth. It is a development of spiritual consciousness. It involves awakening, cleansing, and deepening until the soul becomes united with the source of life. The mystic fact is important because it shows us that human beings are not only rational or physical, they also have a hidden depth that seeks eternal truth. Mystics show what this hidden depth can achieve. They remind us that we are more than our senses, more than our thoughts, more than our daily struggles. We are also capable of touching the infinite. This part of the book explores mysticism from different angles. It looks at mysticism and vitalism, mysticism and psychology, mysticism and theology, mysticism and symbolism, and mysticism and magic. By doing this, Underhill clears away confusion and prepares us to see mysticism as a unique and essential fact. The introduction to Part 1 tells us that before we can walk the mystic way, we must first understand what mysticism is. We must see where it begins and what makes it different from other paths of thought. That is why the first chapter is called The Point of Departure. It shows us the starting place of all mystic experience. Chapter 1. The Point of Departure. Every journey begins with a starting point. For the mystic, the starting point is human life as we know it. We begin in the ordinary world, surrounded by physical things, daily duties, and social structures. Yet, deep within, there's a sense that something greater exists. This inner hunger, this quiet restlessness, is the seed of mysticism. Underhill explains that the point of departure for mysticism is not a system of beliefs, but an experience of longing. It is the call of the soul towards something beyond itself. This is not the same as ordinary religious faith. Faith accepts truths taught by tradition. Mysticism wants to see and touch those truths directly. It wants personal contact with the eternal. Human beings are always reaching outward for knowledge, beauty, and love. We build science to understand the world. We create art to express beauty. We seek relationships to share love. But the mystic feels that all these outer forms point to something higher. Science hints at the order of creation. Art hints at the eternal beauty. Love hints at the unity of all life. The mystic wants to go beyond the hints to the source itself. This is why Underhill calls mysticism a fact. It is not an escape from life, but a deepening of it. The mystic begins from human experience and presses it to its farthest limits. He or she does not reject the world but tries to find its hidden root. In this sense, mysticism is the highest expression of human vitality. Mystics often describe this early stage as a sudden awakening. Something disturbs the settled surface of life. A poet may feel it as a flash of beauty. A philosopher may sense it as a deep truth. An ordinary person may feel it as an overwhelming love or sadness that points to something beyond. Whatever the form, it is a signal. It tells the soul that there is another level of reality waiting to be explored. At this stage, the mystic begins to separate from the common crowd, not by rejecting them, but by listening to a deeper call. He or she feels that the ordinary way of living is not enough. The mystic wants to discover what lies behind appearances. This is the beginning of the journey. Underhill points out that this first movement is not always clear. Some may feel it strongly, others more gently. But all mystics agree that there is a shift from the outer world to the inner world, from living only by sense and reason to living by something greater. It is the spark that sets the whole process in motion. This point of departure shows us that mysticism is not an accident or a fantasy. It grows from real human needs and experiences. It is the answer to the heart's question, is there more than this world of change and death? Mystics say yes. They begin to seek the eternal, not as an idea, but as a living truth. Thus, the first chapter tells us that mysticism begins with a deep hunger of the soul. It begins when the human being dares to take the inner call seriously. From this point, the mystic journey unfolds step by step. But before we can see how the journey continues, we must understand what kind of force drives it. What is the energy behind this restless search for the eternal? To answer this, Underhill takes us in the next chapter to a discussion of mysticism and vitalism. Chapter 2. Mysticism and Vitalism. To understand mysticism better, Underhill compares it with a powerful idea of her time called vitalism. Vitalism is the belief that life is more than mechanical processes. It says that living beings are not just machines made of matter. Instead, there is a special life force or energy that gives them growth, movement, and development. In philosophy and science, vitalism was used to explain why plants grow, why animals move, and why human beings create. It said that behind physical processes, there is a hidden current of life. This current cannot be measured by science, but can be felt in living things. Underhill finds this idea helpful to explain mysticism. Mysticism is also about life energy, but at a higher level. Just as physical life develops from a seed into a tree, spiritual life develops from a spark into union with God. The mystic is not someone who runs away from life. The mystic is the one who lets life grow to its full and highest power. Mysticism, then, is the flowering of the spirit, just as vitalism describes the flowering of nature. This comparison helps us see that mysticism is not against life. It is life in its most intense form. Ordinary life expresses itself in action, thought, and feeling. Mystical life expresses itself in direct contact with the eternal. It is like a stream flowing back to its source. The force that pushes the mystic forward is the same life energy that makes the seed push through the soil or the artist create a work of beauty. Underhill stresses that mysticism is not about weakness or escape. It is about vitality. The mystic does not withdraw because the world is too strong. The mystic turns inward because the inner life is even stronger. It is not rejection, but transformation. This is why mysticism often produces people of great energy, courage, and creativity. They live not only for themselves, but for a truth greater than themselves. When we compare mysticism with vitalism, we also see the difference. Vitalism speaks of physical and biological life. Mysticism speaks of spiritual life. Vitalism says there is an unseen force in the body. Mysticism says there is an unseen presence beyond the body and mind. Vitalism explains nature. Mysticism seeks the eternal source of nature. The point of this chapter is to make us understand that mysticism is the natural continuation of the life process. Just as life does not stop at physical survival, but pushes toward growth and beauty, so mysticism does not stop at ordinary religion. It pushes toward living contact with the divine. This also shows why mysticism is a universal fact. Every human being has life energy. Every human being can feel the hunger for more life. Mystics are those who let this hunger lead them to the highest reality. They are like pioneers who show that the spirit, like the body, has its own growth. In this way, Underhill links mysticism with vitalism to prove that mysticism is not an unnatural thing. It is as natural as growth itself. It is not an added decoration, but the full expression of life. Mysticism is vitality raised to its highest power. Now that we see mysticism as a living energy, the next question is about its relation to the human mind. Is it only an emotional state? Is it a dream of the imagination? Or does psychology give us clues to understand it better? To answer this, Underhill takes us to the next chapter, which is called Mysticism and Psychology. Chapter 3. Mysticism and Psychology. If mysticism is a fact of human life, then psychology must also have something to say about it. Psychology studies the workings of the human mind, emotions, and behavior. At first glance, it may seem that mysticism can be fully explained as a psychological state. Perhaps it is a dream, an emotion, or even a kind of illusion. Many scientists and thinkers of the modern age tried to explain mystics in this way. Underhill accepts that psychology gives us many important tools. It can explain how human memory, imagination, and emotion work. It can describe the conditions under which people may experience visions, ecstasies, or sudden changes of consciousness. For example, psychology can tell us how a person's inner images appear during prayer or meditation. It can also explain why a person might hear inner voices or feel a powerful emotion of unity with the world. But Underhill argues that psychology cannot fully explain mysticism. It can describe the forms, but not the essence. It can explain how an experience looks to the outer observer, but not what it means to the mystic himself or herself. For the mystic, the experience is not simply imagination. It is contact with a living reality. To reduce it to brainwaves or emotions would be like reducing love to chemistry or music to sound vibrations. The explanation is not false, but it leaves out the most important truth. Mystics themselves often warn that visions and voices are not the core of their path. They may appear, but they are only signs along the way. The real essence is union with the divine, a state beyond words and images. Psychology cannot measure this because it is beyond ordinary states of consciousness. It is not a breakdown of the mind, but a breakthrough to a deeper level of reality. Another point Underhill makes is that mysticism is not madness. Some critics have thought that mystics are mentally ill or abnormal. But when we look closely at the lives of true mystics, we often find balance, creativity, and courage. They are not destroyed by their experiences. They are strengthened by them. Their lives show love, service, and wisdom. This is far from the confusion of insanity. Psychology can show us that mystical experiences often come through introversion, silence, or contemplation. It can tell us that concentration and emotional energy prepare the mind for deep states, but psychology cannot say why these states bring knowledge, peace, and transformation. The mystic insists that these states are not just inner tricks, they are contact with a real presence, the eternal truth itself. Thus, psychology and mysticism are not enemies. Psychology helps us understand the conditions and forms of mystical life. But mysticism goes beyond psychology. It claims to know a reality that psychology cannot measure. Just as physics cannot measure beauty, psychology cannot measure union with God. At this point, Underhill has shown us that mysticism is not only vitality, but also not reducible to psychology. It is both natural and supernatural. It uses the human mind, but it points beyond the mind. It is the spirit finding its true home. Now, having seen mysticism compared with life energy and psychology, we must ask what its real qualities are. What makes a mystic different from a dreamer, a poet, or a philosopher? What marks the path of the mystic? To answer this, Underhill takes us in the next chapter to a clear description of the characteristics of mysticism. Chapter 4. The characteristics of mysticism. After comparing mysticism with life energy and psychology, Underhill now describes the special marks that truly define it. She wants us to clearly see what separates mysticism from dreams, visions, or imagination. Mysticism is not just a passing feeling. It is a serious process of transformation. It changes the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. The first and most important characteristic is that mysticism is practical, not only theoretical. A mystic does not just think about God. The mystic seeks to live in union with God. This is why mysticism is often called the art of union. It is about practice and experience, not only ideas. The mystic becomes a new person through this union. The second mark is that mysticism is about the human soul reaching toward the absolute. It is not satisfied with half-truths. It wants direct contact with the eternal. It is not content with doctrines or rituals alone. These may help, but they are not the goal. The goal is to touch reality itself. The third characteristic is that mysticism involves love. The energy that drives the mystic is not curiosity or fear, but love. The mystic loves the divine and longs to be united with it. This love gives strength to face trials, purifications, and even the dark night of the soul. It is the same love that inspires the great saints, poets, and prophets. Without love, mysticism would not be alive. The fourth mark is that mysticism is a process of transformation. It is not one sudden event, but a whole journey. The mystic passes through stages, from awakening to purification, from illumination to union. Each stage deepens the person's life and character. This is why mysticism often produces people of extraordinary strength and compassion. They are changed by their contact with the eternal. Another important characteristic is that mysticism is active as well as passive. The mystic does not only wait for God to come. The mystic also prepares, prays, meditates, and disciplines the self. But at the same time, the final union is a gift. It cannot be forced. The mystic does everything possible, but the last step comes by grace. So mysticism is both effort and surrender. Mysticism is also marked by a sense of certainty. Mystics insist that their experience is real. They may struggle to put it into words, but they are sure of its truth. To them, union with the divine is more real than anything else in the world. This certainty gives them courage to face doubts, opposition, and even suffering. Finally, mysticism is universal. Though it appears in different religions and cultures, its essence is the same. The mystic of Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, or Buddhism speaks with a similar voice. They may use different names and symbols, but the experience of union is shared. This shows that mysticism is not a private invention. It is a human reality that transcends boundaries. By showing these characteristics, Underhill clears away many confusions. Mysticism is not the same as philosophy, though it uses thought. It is not the same as psychology, though it passes through the mind. It is not magic or mere symbolism. It is the direct union of the human soul with the divine. Now that we know the signs of true mysticism, we must see how it relates to theology. If mysticism is about direct union with God, how does it stand in relation to religious doctrines, traditions, and beliefs? Does it support them or go beyond them? This is the question that Underhill takes up in the next chapter, Mysticism and Theology. Chapter 5. Mysticism and Theology. Mysticism is about direct experience of the divine. Theology is about ideas, doctrines, and explanations of God. At first sight, they may appear to be very different. The mystic seeks union, while the theologian studies and defines. But Underhill explains that mysticism and theology are not enemies. They are different ways of approaching the same truth. Theology works with concepts. It uses human language, philosophy, and logic to speak about God. It builds systems of thought, statements of belief, and rules for religious life. These are important because they give structure and clarity to faith, but theology alone can never give direct contact with God. It can only point toward it. Mysticism, on the other hand, is the living heart of religion. It seeks not only to speak about God, but to live in God. It goes beyond the mind into experience. For this reason, mysticism sometimes looks as if it ignores theology. Mystics often speak in ways that break the boundaries of doctrine. They use poetry, paradox, and silence to describe what cannot be captured by ideas. This can create tension between mystics and theologians. Theologians may accuse mystics of being vague or even dangerous. Mystics may feel that theology is too dry, too limited by words. Yet both are needed. Theology keeps mysticism from becoming too wild or confused. Mysticism keeps theology from becoming lifeless or mechanical. Together they balance each other. Underhill stresses that many of the greatest mystics, such as Augustine, Aquinas, Eckhart, and Teresa, were also theologians. They combined thought with experience. Their theology was alive because it grew out of union with God. This shows that theology and mysticism can work hand in hand. But Underhill also warns that mysticism is never fully captured by theology. Doctrines can guide, but they cannot replace experience. Mysticism always keeps an element that goes beyond words. This is why mystics often speak in symbols and images. They know that language can only point toward the truth, not contain it. The role of theology, then, is like a map. It shows the way, gives directions, and explains dangers. But the actual journey must be made in life and experience. Mysticism is that journey. It is walking the path and reaching the destination. Theology may describe the mountain. Mysticism is climbing it. This chapter makes clear that mysticism is not against religion. It is the inner fire that gives meaning to doctrines and rituals. Theology and mysticism belong together, each serving the other. Without theology, mysticism may lose clarity. Without mysticism, theology may lose life. Now that Underhill has shown the relation between mysticism and theology, she turns to another important theme. If mystics speak about the unspeakable, how do they communicate their experiences? They cannot fully explain union with God in plain words, so they use images, metaphors, and symbolic language. This brings us to the next chapter, which is called Mysticism and Symbolism. Chapter 6. Mysticism and Symbolism. Mysticism deals with experiences that go beyond ordinary words. The mystic touches a reality that is infinite, eternal, and beyond form. How can such an experience be expressed in human language? Underhill explains that mystics use symbolism as their bridge. Symbols are pictures, images, or comparisons that point toward truths which cannot be fully spoken. Symbolism has always been part of religion. We see it in rituals, sacred stories, and holy objects. Bread and wine, the cross, the lotus, or the light of a candle are all symbols. They point beyond themselves to deeper realities. Mystics use such symbols to express their union with God. When they say God is light, fire, or ocean, they are not giving literal descriptions. They are using images to hint at the indescribable. Underhill reminds us that symbolism is necessary because the human mind works with forms and images. We cannot think about the infinite directly, so mystics clothe their experiences in language that others can understand. Yet they always know that the symbol is only a sign, not the reality itself. A finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. In the same way, the image of divine light is not God, but a way to point toward God. Mystics from all traditions use similar symbols. They speak of fire that burns away the self, of journeys through deserts, of rivers flowing back to the sea. They describe climbing a mountain or entering a hidden garden. These symbols are not accidents. They show the universal nature of mystical experience. Different cultures may use different forms, but the heart of the message is the same. Symbolism also protects the mystic. Direct speech about God may sound shocking or dangerous to others, but in symbols, the truth can be hidden yet shared. A poet can say things in verse that a theologian cannot say in plain argument. Mystics often choose poetry, song, or vision to express their deepest truths. At the same time, Underhill warns that symbolism has limits. If we mistake the symbol for the reality, we lose the truth. The map is not the land. The candle is not the light itself. Mystics always remind us to look beyond the symbol to what it represents. Symbols are tools, not final answers. This chapter shows us why mysticism is so rich in art, poetry, and metaphor. Because it deals with what cannot be spoken, it turns to the language of the heart. We see this in the writings of Rumi, St. John of the Cross, Meister Eckhart, and many others. Their words shine with symbols that lead the reader to taste what cannot be directly explained. By showing the role of symbolism, Underhill prepares us to understand the difference between mysticism and other paths that also use secret words and signs. One such path is magic. Magic also uses symbols, rituals, and hidden meanings. But its purpose is very different. To understand this difference clearly, Underhill turns in the next chapter to the subject of mysticism and magic. Chapter 7. Mysticism and Magic. Throughout history, mysticism has often been confused with magic. Both seem to deal with hidden forces and secret experiences. Both use symbols, rituals, and unusual language. But Underhill explains that the two are very different in nature, purpose, and spirit. Magic is about power. The magician seeks control over the unseen world in order to achieve results in the visible world. This might mean using spells, charms, or rituals to gain wealth, love, health, or victory. The aim of magic is to bend hidden powers to human will. It is the self trying to command the universe. Mysticism is the opposite. The mystic does not seek power over life, but surrender to the source of life. The goal is not control but union. The mystic gives up the self in order to live in God. Instead of using hidden forces for personal gain, the mystic opens the soul to be transformed by divine love. The direction is upward, toward God, not downward toward personal desires. Underhill stresses that this difference is absolute. Magic may sometimes look religious, but its spirit is self-centered. Mysticism may sometimes look like magic, but its spirit is God-centered. The magician says, "My will be done." The mystic says, "Thy will be done." Yet there are reasons why people confuse them. Both may use strange symbols. Both may involve visions or extraordinary states of consciousness. Both may even use rituals of silence, fasting, or prayer. But the inner meaning is not the same. For the mystic, these practices are about purification and surrender. For the magician, they are techniques of control. Another difference is in the fruits. Magic often produces pride, desire, or illusion. It keeps the self at the center. Mysticism produces humility, love, and service. It moves the self out of the way so that the divine can shine through. By their results, we can tell them apart. Underhill is clear that real mysticism has nothing to do with magical tricks. It does not claim secret powers or shortcuts to divine truth. It is a path of discipline, suffering, love, and gradual union. It asks not what we can get from God, but how we can give ourselves to God. By separating mysticism from magic, Underhill clears the ground for the second part of her book. We now understand that mysticism is not imagination, not psychology, not theology alone, not just symbols, and certainly not magic. It is its own reality, the experience of direct union with the eternal. It is the deepest fact of human spiritual life. With this foundation, we are ready to move from description to practice. In the next part of the book, Underhill shows us how the mystic path actually unfolds. She calls it the mystic way. It is the story of the soul's journey, step by step, from awakening to purification, illumination, dark night, and final union. The next chapter begins with an introduction to the mystic way. Part 2, the mystic way. Introduction. In Part 1, we explored what mysticism is, its characteristics, and how it differs from psychology, theology, symbolism, and magic. Now we enter the second part of the book, the mystic way. This part is not about definitions or theories. It is about the journey itself, the path the soul follows toward union with the divine. The mystic way is like a map for spiritual growth. It shows the stages that mystics across history have experienced. It begins with the awakening of the soul, when the call of God or the eternal first disturbs ordinary life. It moves through purification, illumination, and the struggles of the dark night. Finally, it reaches the Unitive Life, where the mystic experiences complete union with the divine. This journey is not imaginary or magical. It is a real inner process. It involves effort, discipline, love, and surrender. It also involves experiences that may seem extraordinary, such as visions, voices, ecstasy, and deep peace. Yet all these experiences are secondary to the inner transformation of the soul. Underhill emphasizes that the mystic way is universal. While different religions use different forms, names, and rituals, the inner journey is the same. Christian mystics, Hindu mystics, Sufi mystics, and Buddhist mystics all describe similar stages. The path is human and divine at the same time. It begins with the self and ends in God. This part prepares us to understand mysticism not only as a concept, but as a lived reality. It teaches that spiritual life is a movement from awakening to union, from desire to surrender, from separation to oneness. Each stage of the mystic way builds upon the last, leading the soul deeper into its own essence and closer to the eternal. Now, we begin the first chapter of this part, called Introductory. Here, Underhill explains the conditions and the inner attitude necessary for walking the mystic way. She introduces the seeker to the disciplines, attitudes, and experiences that prepare the soul for awakening. This chapter sets the foundation for the stages that follow. Chapter 1. Introductory. The mystic way begins with an awakening. This awakening is the soul's first movement toward the divine. Before it, life is lived mainly in routine, habit, and ordinary concerns. The world is enough, and the self is satisfied with daily experiences. Then something stirs within, a deep restlessness, a yearning, a sense that life is more than it seems. This stirring is the first sign that the soul is ready for the path of mysticism. Underhill emphasizes that this awakening is not forced or artificial. It is a natural response to the soul's inner call. It can come as dissatisfaction with worldly life, a sudden insight, or an encounter with beauty or truth that cannot be explained. Some mystics describe it as a spiritual birth, the moment when the soul realizes there is more beyond ordinary existence. At this stage, the seeker must learn self-awareness. Honesty is essential. One must recognize personal weaknesses, attachments, and distractions. Without this clarity, the soul cannot begin purification. The path of mysticism requires sincerity and openness. The seeker must genuinely desire transformation, not merely unusual experiences or excitement. The introductory chapter also focuses on the preparation of the mind. The mystic learns to cultivate attention and stillness. Meditation, prayer, and contemplation are vital tools. They train the mind to concentrate, to quiet the constant chatter of ordinary thoughts, and to open toward higher realities. These practices do not guarantee experiences, but they create readiness to receive them. Another key point Underhill makes is that this stage is often delicate and challenging. The seeker may face doubt, fear, or confusion. Inner struggles are common, yet these difficulties are not obstacles. They are part of the growth process. They teach patience, humility, and perseverance. Each challenge helps the soul move beyond attachments and illusions. At the same time, the mystic must recognize the balance between effort and surrender. The path is not only about work or discipline, it is also about openness to grace, the divine energy that transforms the soul. The mystic's role is to prepare, purify, and give the self. The final union is a gift, not a result of force or will alone. The introductory stage is also where the seeker becomes aware of the importance of moral life. Purification begins in everyday actions, in honesty, compassion, and service. Without this foundation, deeper experiences may be confusing or misleading. The mystic way is holistic. It combines mind, heart, and will, all guided by love. Underhill stresses that the journey is progressive. No stage is skipped. The introductory stage prepares the soul for the next step, awakening to its true nature. It is like the seed breaking through the soil, feeling the light, and preparing to grow. The soul begins to perceive a reality beyond ordinary life, a truth that is eternal, constant, and living. This chapter sets the stage for the first true movement on the mystic way. The next chapter, The Awakening of the Self, begins the process of spiritual realization. Here, the seeker becomes conscious of the inner self and the divine presence within and around them. The next chapter begins. Chapter 2. The Awakening of the Self. The first true stage of the mystic way is the awakening of the self. The soul begins to recognize its own deeper nature. It is no longer satisfied with outward appearances, ordinary pleasures, or intellectual knowledge alone. Something inside stirs, drawing the person toward a reality that is eternal, living, and infinite. Underhill explains that this awakening can take many forms. For some, it comes as a sudden insight, a moment of spiritual vision. For others, it is gradual, a slow recognition of the insufficiency of ordinary life. Some may feel it through beauty, music, or nature. Others may experience it through suffering, loss, or deep longing. In every case, the soul senses that life has a higher purpose and that God or the ultimate reality is calling. The awakening is also marked by a growing self-awareness. The seeker begins to notice inner habits, desires, and attachments. What was once accepted as normal may now seem shallow or limiting. This recognition is not meant to create guilt or fear. It is meant to awaken the desire for growth and transformation. During this stage, the seeker may experience inner conflicts. Old attachments, fears, and illusions resist the movement of the soul. But these struggles are natural and necessary. They purify the self and prepare it for higher stages. The mystic learns that awakening requires courage, patience, and honesty. Another important feature of the awakening is the emergence of moral and spiritual sensitivity. The soul begins to notice the effects of actions, thoughts, and words on itself and others. A sense of right and wrong deepens. Compassion, love, and humility become more real and necessary. The awakening of the self is both an inner discovery and a call to a more sincere, upright life. Underhill emphasizes that awakening is always a combination of effort and grace. The soul must listen, seek, and desire transformation. But the final impulse comes from the divine presence that draws the self upward. The awakening cannot be manufactured by will alone. It is a gift, a spark that ignites the journey. Once awakened, the seeker is ready for deeper work. the soul becomes aware of the need for purification, which is the next stage. Purification involves removing attachments, selfish desires, and illusions. It is the process by which the soul clears the way for illumination and direct contact with the divine. The awakening of the self also opens the seeker to extraordinary experiences. Visions, inner voices, and heightened awareness may occur, but Underhill reminds us that these are secondary. The central focus is the transformation of the self and the movement toward union with God. This chapter shows that the mystic way is a living, dynamic process. It begins when the soul recognizes its true nature and hears the call of the eternal. The awakening prepares the ground for purification, the next essential stage of the journey. The next chapter begins with the purification of the self, where the seeker learns to clear the inner obstacles and prepare fully for illumination. Chapter 3. The Purification of the Self. After the awakening of the self, the next stage on the mystic way is purification. Purification is the process by which the soul clears itself of attachments, illusions, and selfish desires. It is the necessary preparation for illumination and union with the divine. Without purification, the soul cannot fully receive or sustain higher spiritual experiences. Underhill explains that purification is both moral and spiritual. Morally, it involves recognizing and overcoming faults, weaknesses, and harmful habits. It requires honesty, humility, and self-discipline. Spiritually, purification means detachment from worldly desires, false satisfactions, and illusions about the self. The seeker must learn to let go of ego-centered concerns and focus on the divine presence within and around. This stage is often difficult and sometimes painful. The soul encounters resistance from old habits and attachments. The mind may resist, the emotions may rebel, and the body may demand comfort and ease. Yet these struggles are necessary. They purify the self by revealing hidden attachments and cleansing inner impurities. Through this process, the seeker becomes more sincere, humble, and open. Purification also requires discipline and practice. Meditation, prayer, fasting, and reflection help the soul detach from distractions and focus on the higher reality. The mystic learns to observe thoughts and feelings without being controlled by them. This practice strengthens the will, deepens self-awareness, and clears the way for illumination. Underhill emphasizes that purification is not about punishment or self-denial for its own sake. It is about making the self ready to receive divine love and truth. The soul must be like a clean vessel to contain the light of God. Purification is the process of emptying the self of false desires so that the divine can fill it completely. This stage also involves humility and surrender. The seeker realizes that personal effort alone is not enough. While discipline and preparation are important, the final transformation comes from grace. Purification teaches the soul to trust, to surrender, and to rely on the divine presence to guide the journey. Another aspect of purification is the training of the imagination and the emotions. Many mystical experiences involve visions, inner images, and feelings of ecstasy or rapture. Without purification, these experiences can mislead or inflate the ego. A purified soul, however, can receive these experiences with clarity, understanding, and love. By the end of this stage, the seeker is ready for illumination. The soul is cleansed of ego-centered desires, attachments, and illusions. It is humble, receptive, and open. The divine light can now enter more fully, bringing insight, vision, and union. Purification prepares the seeker not only for extraordinary mystical experiences, but also for the deeper transformation of character and consciousness. It is the essential bridge between awakening and illumination. The next chapter begins with the illumination of the self, where the soul begins to experience the divine presence more directly and deeply. Chapter 4. The illumination of the self. After purification, the soul reaches the stage of illumination. This is the point where the divine presence begins to shine clearly within the seeker. The soul experiences insight, vision, and understanding that go beyond ordinary knowledge. It is a stage of awakening to divine reality itself. Underhill explains that illumination is not mere intellectual knowledge. It is a direct, living experience of the eternal. The soul perceives truths that cannot be learned through books or reasoning. It feels the unity of all life and the presence of the divine in every being. This stage brings joy, peace, and a deep sense of purpose. Illumination often comes gradually. Sometimes it appears as sudden flashes of insight. Sometimes it unfolds slowly, like the rising sun. The seeker begins to see the inner meaning of life, the interconnectedness of all things, and the divine order behind apparent chaos. One of the main signs of illumination is clarity. The soul can see through illusions and falsehoods that once clouded perception. Selfish desires, fears, and attachments lose their power. The soul begins to act with wisdom, love, and understanding. Decisions are guided by deeper insight rather than temporary emotion. Another sign of illumination is inner peace. The soul no longer depends on external conditions for happiness. It finds fulfillment in the presence of the divine. Even in suffering, the enlightened soul remains steady, calm, and compassionate. The source of joy is no longer in the changing world, but in the eternal presence within. Illumination also brings a sense of mission or purpose. The mystic feels drawn to serve others, to bring light where there is darkness, and to express divine love in action. This stage transforms both inner life and outer behavior. It is not a private experience, but a living reality that affects all aspects of life. Underhill notes that illumination may be accompanied by extraordinary experiences. Visions, voices, or feelings of rapture may occur, but these are secondary. The true illumination is the inner perception of divine reality. Experiences may come and go, but the clarity and peace of illumination remain. At this stage, the mystic also develops deeper discernment. The soul can distinguish between true guidance from the divine and false impressions from the imagination or ego. This discernment protects the seeker from misunderstanding or spiritual pride. Illumination prepares the soul for the deeper stages of the mystic way. It is the stage before ecstasy, introversion, and the dark night of the soul. The purified and illuminated soul is ready to receive more profound experiences of love, union, and surrender. The next chapter begins with Voices and Visions, where Underhill describes the extraordinary experiences that often accompany illumination. These experiences are signs of the soul's contact with higher realities, but are always secondary to inner transformation. The next chapter begins. Chapter 5. Voices and Visions. At the stage of illumination, the mystic may begin to experience voices and visions. These experiences are outward signs of the inner life of the soul. They often come as a way of communicating truths that cannot be fully expressed in ordinary language. Underhill stresses that these are not the essence of mysticism, but they accompany it for many seekers. Voices may be heard inwardly as a sense of guidance or instruction. They are usually calm, gentle, and full of wisdom. They may speak of love, duty, or insight into the nature of God and reality. Visions may appear as images, symbols, or scenes that carry meaning for the soul. These visions are often symbolic, not literal, pointing toward deeper spiritual truths. Such experiences can be confusing or even frightening for beginners. They may not know how to interpret what they see or hear. Underhill emphasizes the importance of discernment. The seeker must understand that these experiences are tools, not ends. They are meant to guide, inspire, or purify, not to glorify the self or create pride. Many mystics report that voices and visions are accompanied by deep emotion. Joy, awe, love, or even sorrow may arise. The experiences are intense but not overwhelming for the prepared soul. Purification and illumination allow the mystic to receive them calmly and with understanding. Underhill points out that not all mystics have dramatic voices or visions. Some experience illumination quietly, without any outward signs. The key is the inner transformation, not the spectacle. Voices and visions are secondary, even if they are striking and memorable. These experiences often serve to strengthen the soul's faith and devotion. They confirm the reality of the divine presence and encourage the seeker to continue the path. They may also reveal truths about the self, humanity, and God's will. The soul learns to listen deeply, to observe without attachment, and to discern what is essential. Underhill warns against overvaluing these phenomena. A seeker who seeks visions for personal excitement risks confusion, pride, or attachment. The mystic must focus on the inner journey, not on extraordinary experiences. Voices and visions are signs of progress, not the goal itself. Another important aspect of this stage is that the experiences often deepen the soul's sense of love and compassion. Seeing or hearing divine messages can awaken empathy, care, and service toward others. The mystic realizes that illumination is not for personal gain, but to live and act in harmony with divine truth. The stage of voices and visions prepares the soul for introversion and contemplation. The mystic learns to turn inward, reflect deeply, and listen to the inner voice. This inward movement is essential for deeper union with God. The next chapter begins with introversion. Part 1. Recollection and Quiet, where Underhill explains how the mystic withdraws from the outer world and turns attention to the inner life. The next chapter begins, Chapter 6, Introversion, Part 1, Recollection and Quiet. After illumination, the mystic begins the inward journey called introversion. This is the process of turning attention away from the outer world and focusing on the inner life. Underhill explains that introversion is essential for deeper union with the divine. Without it, the soul remains distracted by external desires, opinions, and activities. The first stage of introversion is recollection. The soul gathers itself, like water returning to its source. Thoughts, emotions, and distractions are observed and released. The mystic learns to withdraw attention from the constant chatter of the mind. This does not mean ignoring the world, but creating a still place within where God may be encountered. Quiet is the next step. The soul becomes calm, peaceful, and attentive. External noise fades, and internal activity slows. In this silence, the presence of God becomes more apparent. The mystic listens with the heart, not only with the mind. Every movement, thought, or feeling is observed with care, without judgment or attachment. Underhill emphasizes that recollection and quiet are not easy to achieve. The mind naturally resists stillness. Emotions pull attention outward. Daily concerns demand energy. Yet through practice, prayer, meditation, and patience, the soul gradually learns to hold itself in quiet. Recollection also strengthens memory and self-awareness. The mystic reviews thoughts, actions, and feelings to understand inner patterns. This helps to recognize attachments, errors, and areas that need purification. Without recollection, introversion would be superficial. With it, the soul becomes attentive, honest, and aware of its inner life. Quiet brings a deeper awareness of the soul's unity with the divine. The mystic feels the self resting in the presence of God. This experience is often accompanied by peace, joy, and a sense of security. It may also produce humility, as the soul realizes its dependence on the divine. The mystic learns that union is not achieved by effort alone, but by openness and receptivity. Underhill points out that recollection and quiet are necessary before more active contemplation. They prepare the mind and heart to focus entirely on God. Without quiet, higher experiences such as ecstasy, visions, or the dark night of the soul may be confusing or overwhelming. Introversion is the foundation for all subsequent mystical stages. During this stage, the mystic also learns the balance between effort and surrender. One must practice discipline, yet remain open to divine guidance. One must strive for quiet, yet not cling to experiences. The soul becomes both active and receptive, attentive and surrendered. Recollection and quiet are not ends in themselves. They are the doorway to contemplation, ecstasy, and unitive life. They allow the soul to hear the inner voice, perceive deeper truths, and receive divine illumination without distraction. The next chapter begins with introversion. Part 2, Contemplation, where Underhill explains how the mystic moves from quiet inward focus to active contemplation of the divine presence. The next chapter begins. Chapter 7, Introversion. Part 2, Contemplation. After achieving recollection and quiet, the mystic moves into contemplation. Contemplation is the active focusing of the soul on the divine presence. While quiet prepares the mind by calming distractions, contemplation directs attention to God, truth, or ultimate reality. It is a deliberate, loving gaze toward the eternal. Underhill explains that contemplation is not just thinking or meditation. It is the soul's engagement with the divine in a deeper, more intimate way. The mind, heart, and will are all involved. Thoughts may still occur, but they are guided and surrendered. The soul observes and opens to the divine presence without judgment or interference. Contemplation often brings a heightened awareness of God's love. The mystic may feel enveloped by peace, warmth, or light. These experiences are signs of divine contact, but are not the goal themselves. The real purpose is union, the transformation of the self through direct experience of God. At this stage, the soul practices attentiveness and devotion. Every act of contemplation strengthens love, humility, and surrender. The mystic learns to let go of self-centered desires and ego-driven thoughts. The focus is entirely outward toward the divine, yet inward in personal receptivity. Underhill emphasizes that contemplation can involve extraordinary experiences. Visions, voices, or intense emotions may occur. These experiences are secondary and symbolic. They guide the soul, confirm its path, and deepen devotion. The mystic learns to accept them without attachment, recognizing them as signs, not ends. One of the key effects of contemplation is transformation of the will. The soul begins to desire only what aligns with divine truth. Selfish motives diminish, and service, compassion, and moral integrity grow. Contemplation is thus both experience and moral training, refining character and expanding consciousness. Another important aspect of this stage is integration. The mystic learns to bring inner experiences into outer life. Contemplation does not remove one from the world, but allows the soul to act from love, insight, and clarity. Every action becomes a reflection of the inner union with the divine. Contemplation also prepares the soul for higher states of mystical life. It is the doorway to ecstasy and rapture, where the soul experiences union more directly and intensely. It also lays the groundwork for the dark night of the soul, where deeper purification and surrender are required. Underhill warns that contemplation requires patience and perseverance. The mind naturally wanders and distractions arise. The soul may feel stagnation or doubt, yet consistent practice, devotion, and surrender lead to gradual progress. The experiences may deepen slowly, but each step strengthens the foundation for union. The next chapter begins with ecstasy and rapture, where the mystic experiences intense joy, union, and transcendence. These states are extraordinary, but always flow from the inner work of recollection, quiet, and contemplation. The next chapter begins. Chapter 8, Ecstasy and Rapture. After contemplation, the mystic may enter states called ecstasy and rapture. These are extraordinary experiences of joy, union, and transcendence. They are the soul's response to the presence of the divine, and they reveal the depth of inner transformation. Ecstasy is a state in which the soul feels lifted beyond ordinary consciousness. The mystic may feel a sense of boundless freedom, lightness, or expansion. The boundaries of the self seem to disappear, and the soul experiences a profound connection with God. It is a state of intense awareness and inner delight, yet it is not simply emotional excitement. It is a deeply spiritual experience, rooted in purification, illumination, and contemplation. Rapture is similar but often more intense. It may include sensations of overwhelming love, delight, or union. the soul may feel immersed in divine presence, as if time, space, and worldly concerns no longer exist. This state can be brief or prolonged, depending on the soul's preparation and receptivity. Underhill stresses that these experiences are not goals to be pursued by desire. They are gifts that come when the soul is ready. Both ecstasy and rapture can be accompanied by visions, voices, or heightened perceptions. However, these phenomena are secondary. The primary reality is the inward experience of divine presence and union. The soul learns to remain attentive, humble, and receptive. Attachment or desire for these experiences can hinder true progress. Underhill explains that ecstasy and rapture serve several purposes. They confirm the soul's awakening and illumination. They deepen love, devotion, and surrender. They inspire moral transformation and reinforce the mystical path. They also provide a foretaste of the unitive life, where the soul will dwell continuously in divine union. These states, however, are not permanent. The mystic eventually returns to ordinary life. This return can be challenging, as the soul longs for the intensity of divine presence. Yet this longing encourages further purification, contemplation, and surrender. It teaches the soul detachment and humility, showing that union is not dependent on extraordinary states alone. Underhill emphasizes that ecstasy and rapture are deeply personal and subjective. Different mystics experience them in different ways. One may feel intense emotional joy, another a serene, luminous presence. One may encounter visions and symbols, another experiences pure awareness. The form varies, but the essence, the intimate connection with the divine, is universal. These experiences also prepare the soul for the next stage, the dark night of the soul. Even the most joyful union is incomplete. The soul must learn deeper surrender, face inner trials, and let go of remaining attachments. Ecstasy and rapture are not ends, but steps leading to final union. The next chapter begins with the dark night of the soul, where Underhill explores the trials, purifications, and inner transformations that deepen the soul's capacity for complete divine union. The next chapter begins. Chapter 9, The Dark Night of the Soul. Even after experiencing illumination, contemplation, ecstasy, and rapture, the mystic faces another stage called the dark night of the soul. This stage is often difficult, painful, and confusing. It is a time when the soul feels abandoned, empty, or distant from the divine presence. Underhill explains that the dark night is a necessary part of the mystic way. The dark night is not a punishment. It is a stage of deeper purification and transformation. All remaining attachments, illusions, and ego-centered desires are confronted and released. The soul learns to let go of dependence on feelings, visions, or extraordinary experiences. It is a process of stripping away everything that obscures true union. During this stage, the mystic may experience doubt, fear, or despair. God may seem absent or silent. The inner light may feel dim. Yet these trials are part of spiritual growth. The dark night teaches humility, patience, and complete surrender. It shows that union is not dependent on comfort, joy, or outward signs. Underhill emphasizes that the dark night has both active and passive aspects. The active aspect involves moral effort, prayer, and attention. The mystic must continue seeking truth, observing the self, and practicing discipline. The passive aspect involves allowing divine grace to work within. The soul learns to surrender fully, accepting purification even when it feels painful or uncertain. This stage often brings the mystic closer to true humility. The ego's desires, pride, and illusions are stripped away. The soul realizes that all previous experiences, even illumination and ecstasy, were only steps. True union requires complete emptiness, openness, and receptivity. Another feature of the dark night is the deepening of love. The soul learns to love without expectation, desire, or attachment. Love becomes selfless and universal, extending to all beings. Even in the absence of visible divine presence, the soul acts from devotion and inner connection. The dark night prepares the soul for the unitive life. It is the doorway to final union with the divine, where the soul experiences complete surrender and integration. Without the dark night, the mystic cannot fully relinquish ego-centered tendencies or worldly attachments. Underhill also points out that the dark night can vary in intensity. Some experience it for a short time, others for years. The duration depends on the depth of purification needed. In every case, the stage is transformative, preparing the soul for the fullness of divine life. By the end of the dark night, the soul emerges purified, humble, and receptive. It is ready for the ultimate stage of the mystic way, the unitive life. Here, the soul experiences ongoing union, peace, and fulfillment in God. The next chapter begins with the unitive life, where Underhill explains how the mystic lives in complete union, integrating all previous stages into a sustained, harmonious spiritual existence. The next chapter begins. Chapter 10. The Unitive Life. The final stage of the mystic way is the unitive life. Here, the soul experiences complete union with the divine. All previous stages, awakening, purification, illumination, contemplation, ecstasy, and even the dark night, lead to this stage. The mystic is fully transformed and lives in harmony with God. Underhill explains that the unitive life is not a momentary experience, but a sustained state. The soul remains continuously aware of divine presence. Every thought, feeling, and action flows from this awareness. The self is no longer separate or ego-centered. The mystic lives in love, humility, and service, fully integrated into the divine reality. In the unitive life, ordinary and extraordinary experiences merge. Visions, voices, and raptures may still occur, but they are no longer essential. The soul does not depend on special experiences for joy or connection. The divine presence is constant, accessible, and fully real. Underhill emphasizes that the unitive life involves both action and contemplation. The mystic is deeply engaged with the world, yet inwardly centered on God. Every action is an expression of divine love and wisdom. The unitive life is both mystical and practical. The soul's inner transformation naturally reflects in outer behavior. Humility is a key characteristic of the unitive life. The mystic no longer seeks recognition, power, or pleasure. Ego-centered desires have vanished. Love becomes selfless and universal. Compassion, patience, and generosity are natural expressions of the soul. Another feature of this stage is freedom. The soul is liberated from fear, attachment, and illusion. Life is no longer dominated by anxiety, desire, or worldly concerns. The mystic experiences peace, joy, and inner security. Even in suffering or uncertainty, the soul remains centered in divine presence. Underhill explains that the unitive life is the fulfillment of all spiritual work. The soul no longer struggles to awaken, purify, or illuminate. It has completed the journey of transformation and rests in unity with God. Yet the unitive life is not static. It is a dynamic, living experience, constantly deepening and expanding as the soul grows in love and understanding. The mystic in the unitive life also serves others naturally. Compassion and wisdom guide every action. The presence of God within the soul radiates outward, touching the lives of those around. The unitive life is thus both personal and communal, inwardly intimate, and outwardly generous. Underhill concludes that the mystic way is a path of transformation. Each stage, awakening, purification, illumination, contemplation, ecstasy, dark night, prepares the soul for complete union. The unitive life is the culmination, where the soul lives fully in God, fully in reality, and fully in love. This final stage shows that mysticism is not about extraordinary experiences alone, but about the transformation of the whole person. With the unitive life, the soul completes its journey. It has moved from ordinary existence to full awareness of the divine. It has learned to surrender, to love selflessly, and to act with wisdom and compassion. The journey ends in peace, joy, and complete union with God. This concludes part 2 of the Mystic Way and the main teachings of the book. Readers now understand mysticism as both a process and a living reality, guiding the soul from awakening to the fulfillment of divine union. The book ends here. You've now journeyed through the full path of mysticism, from awakening to the unitive life. If you found this summary insightful and want to explore more wisdom, spiritual guides, and audiobook-style summaries like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit the subscribe button and stay connected for more deep, transformative content. Your subscription helps us create more detailed summaries, guides, and insights for your spiritual and personal growth. Don't miss the next journey. Subscribe now.